But this experience moving from special operations to the conventional side of the Air Force I ended up looking at it as this really great opportunity to cross that threshold into fully understanding how to respond to events that you don't like, to get outcomes that are better. Not the ones that you want, not the ones that are perfect, but better.
Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. Our guest in this episode is Carey Kight. Carey, I am thrilled to finally have you on the podcast. How are you doing, bro?
Dudes, I am stoked to be here. Thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming. We've been chatting about this for a while, and so I'm excited to be here with y'all.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to get your story out. I know you have a lot of amazing things to talk about, and you also run your own podcast called Veteran Made. You uncover amazing stories all the time, so I'd love to tap into that a little bit too and kind of hear some of the amazing things that you've extracted from that experience. But let's start with you. Why don't you tell the audience who you are, a little bit about your background, your service in the Air Force, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in San Diego, California, and Columbus, Ohio. For the Marines in the audience, I lived just inland from Camp Pendleton. So I was on the Fallbrook side of the house till I was about 13, and then moved to Columbus, Ohio, where I did 8th grade and then all of high school. And that's where I enlisted from. Home of record is in Columbus. Did MEPS out here and shipped out. Played sports growing up, football, basketball, track and field, all that stuff. California, surfed a lot and body surfing and snorkeling and scuba diving and kind of all that good stuff. So, for me, joining the military was, I say it's like this is probably pretty classic for GWAT veterans, right? It was like one third patriotism. 9/11 happened when I was in art class in 8th grade. And so, very formative as I went through high school. The GWAT kicked off, and then, halfway through high school, Iraq kicked off. And then, the other 2/3, was I played football in high school, and that was my main sport. That was the thing I was most excited about. My grades weren't that great, and I wasn't good enough to play like D1 ball or anything like that. And so I kind of found myself in a spot where I'd applied to some state schools as backups, but I was really looking to play, D3, D2 ball and apply to these small liberal arts colleges where, my brother played D3 ball around here. And so I was able to kind of watch him do that. But you needed an academic scholarship. Still do. You can't get athletic scholarships to play at that level. And my grades just weren't that good. And so, my dad said, listen, about halfway through high school, he's like, I'll make a deal with you. If you can earn half, I will pay for half. And then you can go and study and play ball. And my grades just weren't that good. I wasn't that interested in my studies. I wasn't that interested in, kind of the formal education. I read a lot, and was, big history buff and wrote really well in English class. Just didn't do well in math and science and those things that were more technical, that required more study and more rigor and more work. And so kind of got to the spot where I was graduating, and I had scrounged together like a third of what it would have cost to go to one of these schools. And so I tried to make a deal with my dad, and I was like, hey man, can I, you put up a half, I put up a third. And so there's a very small amount for a loan, and I can just get a loan for that amount. And he said, no. He said, I made a deal with you, which is I would pay for half if you earned half, and you only earned a third. So that deal is off the table. You go to community college, you can go to one of these state schools, get a job, take a year off of school and get a job and work. But if you're going to live in the house after that, you'd have to pay rent, or that kind of talk track was started. So that kind of kicked in that other. So 1/3 was paying for college, and it kicked in that final third, which was go out on an adventure, get out on my own. My dad and I, my stepmom and I, my brother and I, we all had a really great relationship, and I didn't want to jeopardize that by fighting with them over who was going to pay for school, where I was going to go to school, if I was being responsible or not. And so I was like, you know what, let me get out of here. And so I contacted, it actually started with ROTC. I contacted the ROTC detachment at one of the state schools that I applied to. And the guy laughed at me on the phone. He was like, I was in my manager's office at Steak and Shake, where I waited tables in high school, and I called him on the phone, and I was like, hey, can I've been accepted at the school. Can I get in for ROTC? And he's like, oh no, man, you're like a year and a half too late. You got to do this, 18 months in advance.
Right.
He's like, so you can start that process now, come to school, but then you'd be a year behind in ROTC and all that stuff. He's like, you just contact the enlisted recruiter. So looking back, I don't know if that guy gets a kickback or something, but I did. I took him at face value, and I contacted the enlisted recruiter, and we had a conversation, and he came to the school, and I kind of made the decision right then and there. I was like, you know what, like, let me just enlist, get out of here. And he was smart. He's like, hey, do 4 years, don't do 6. The bonus, will kind of catch up to you as you hit E4. And if you want to stay in, you can stay in, but you can't get out early if you hit 4 years and you want to be done. So, do it that way. And I was like, you know what, this is great. I go out and serve my country, go on an adventure, and secure some GI Bill benefits.
Good deal. Quick question about kind of your dad holding you to the deal you made. Was that pretty tough when he held that to you? And did you learn anything from that?
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was really tough. It was a bummer because I really did think that I loved football enough to go play it at the next level. In retrospect, I don't think I did. I definitely made the right decision. And he and I had such a great relationship. Even at the time, it was really hard to hear him hold that line and to experience him holding that line. But I took him very seriously. And so it was difficult, but it was also kind of the culmination of my childhood, right? Where I'm like, oh yeah, this guy who raised me to be who I am is going to hold this line, and I didn't hold up my end of the bargain, and that means that I don't get to have this thing. And so it was really, really hard at the time. I don't know if I learned anything at the time. But in retrospect now, I mean, the things that I've learned, as a dad myself, I've got a 4.5-year-old, and my wife and I talk about it all the time. It's like, we have to be people of our word, and we have to hold the line, and we own the standards in this house, and not having standards is better than having standards and allowing your children to not meet them. And so at the time, I was just kind of pissed off, but it obviously ended up kind of kickstarting a really cool opportunity in the military. And then now in retrospect, I really understand kind of embodying standards and discipline in a way that I'm not sure I would have kind of had that understanding as a dad now if he hadn't have done that.
So, Carey, how does that affect your decision with your own child? Will you offer him a deal of some sort for college? Will you be more fluid with it? Have you thought about what your plan is 14 years from now?
Yeah, we've thought about that. We were talking offline, Brandon, going to Ole Miss and being from Mississippi. So my wife earned a golf scholarship. She played D1 golf in college. And so the joke has always been like, our kids, we have one right now. She's 4.5. We want to go for number 2. But the joke has always been, no, you're not going to just get college paid for, right? You're going to have to like earn it in some way, whether it's military service or civil service or a scholarship. And obviously that's 14 years away, right? Or, 12, 13 years away as we start to have those conversations. So I don't know. We obviously together as a team have not made that kind of final determination, and we're pretty flexible people anyway. And not to get too in the weeds on finances and the economy and all that stuff, but like, who knows if college
Right.
is what she and hopefully our other child will do. You know what I mean? It's like, we don't know. We're very open-minded on that front. I think the thing that's more important to us is less the idea of like, drawing a hard line about whether or not our children are going to go to college, and more about what I was talking about before, which is we have standards, we own the standards, and we are, going to hold our children to those standards across the board, rather than just thinking about maybe that one specific thing.
Also, to your point about like, who knows what the world will be like. I mean, we have the dawn of AI now and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, our kids might be having like small businesses run by AI by the time
Yeah.
they're like 13,
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's right.
It can unfold with all that kind of stuff. So, I'm with you with standards and it's the lessons and the values and being instilled as opposed to what they do necessarily.
Yeah, just, and obviously, I'm very entrepreneurial, as you know, from the podcast and the production company, and my wife is as well. She co-owns the production company, with me, and we're working towards her leaving her full-time role and coming on board to be, entrepreneurial, full-time with me together and doing that. And so, as we do our own financial planning and we look at what our families, just kind of like picture of wealth looks like moving forward. And I don't mean wealth in the terms of like we are wealthy. I just mean wealth in the terms of, like a diet, right? Like not we're on a diet, but what we eat, right? Like what we manage from a finance and economic standpoint as a family. Like I really want to give, my daughter the opportunity to build a business if that is something that she wants to do, and if there are economic and financial opportunities for her to do that, and there's a good way to do that, great. If college is it, great. If community college is it, great. Like who knows? And so I think finding a way to balance keeping options open while holding her to academic and athletic standards as she grows up. I trust my wife is my teammate, right? I trust her and she trusts me, and we'll kind of make those micro decisions along the way that will kind of ultimately decide what those macro decisions are.
Yeah, man, that's a great strategy. Love the foresight and everything too with that. It's a great point. Let's get back to your story.
Yeah.
Enlist in the Air Force. So what did you enlist to, and like what was the plan, and what did that all kind of turn out for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking about it in terms of those thirds, right? Like that adventure third, in retrospect was the thing that was actually the most important to me, even though I didn't really realize that at the time. So the kind of longer story with the recruiter is, I called him from my manager's office, and he came to the school, in my memory, in my memoir that I'm writing. It was the next day, who knows, maybe it was the next week, but he, I'm sitting in the counselor's office, and we had, a conference room where you wait to speak to whoever's coming in, to the kind of counselor's office or whatever. And, I'm to a very, it's kind of, I guess also another piece of this that's interesting is, nobody from my high school went to the military. It's like me and one other guy who went to the military. Not very many people from our community that I went to high school, middle school, and high school in went to the military, and most that did went to the academies, or went and did ROTC. And so it was, the counselors and my teachers like, dude, what the hell are you doing? And my social studies teacher was one of them. He was a very, very critical thinker, as I was pretty conservative growing up, and, obviously still am in some ways, but I was very conservative growing up. And I kind of thought he was like, oh, this is kind of a crazy liberal guy. He's one of my football coaches too. But I actually just realized looking back, he was just a real critical thinker. And he was like, he understood from a historical perspective better than I did that, the GWAT may not have been the best thing for the people that were going to have their boots on the ground, that were going to be kicking the doors and turning the wrenches. And so, he didn't try to talk me out of it by any stretch, but he did, have some conversations with me. They're like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Is this really what you want to do? And, I was, 18 years old and full of piss and vinegar. So the answer was obviously yes. So anyways, the recruiter comes in, and I kind of watch him come in. He comes in, and it's back 2005, 2006, right? So he's got it's not digital. He's got the physical packet, and he kind of sets it down and does this whole thing, and he starts turning through the pages, and, Air Force guy. And, I don't know why I called the Air Force recruiter. It's just kind of like one of those things. It's like Air Force was it. I mean, my grandfather was in the Army Air Corps, and my great grandfather was in the Army Air Corps, but I wasn't particularly close to them. So maybe it was just kind of a latent subconscious thing. But he sits down, and he kind of opens up, and he starts giving a spiel, and I'm just not listening. I'm just looking at the pages that he's turning. I see lots of aircraft. I see lots of maintainers, I see lots of different things. And then he gets to this guy who is, face painted, full BDUs, in the jungle, big rucksack, training a rifle. I didn't even know what any of those terms I just said was, right? Like I know that now looking back. And I said, stop, I want to do that. What is that? And he kind of like chuckled. He goes, that's special operations. And I said, great, I want to do that. Like how do I do that? And he goes, well, it's not that simple. I was like, okay, well, like, just tell me how it works. He's like, well, and this was at the time in the Air Force, right? There's basically two special operations forces in the Air Force. There was pararescue and there was combat control. And I said, well, which one is which? And he goes, well, they call pararescue, they call PJ school Superman school. It's the hardest one in the DoD. And I was like, great, let's do that. And he goes, again, it doesn't really work that way, Carey. Like you can't just like decide to do that. I said, well, what do we have to do? He goes, well, you gotta take the ASVAB first. and academically, aptitude was probably there. He's like, but then you have to take what's called the PAST, physical and stamina test. And we're in Ohio, right? Mind you, we're in central Ohio. And he's like, so you have to push-ups and pull-ups, sit-ups, a run. He's like, and then you have to swim 500 meters. I was like, no problem. I can do that. He goes, what? Don't you play football and run track and play basketball? I'm like, yeah, but I grew up in San Diego part-time. My stepdad was a water polo coach and a swim coach. Like, I can do it. He's like, dang, really? And I saw the bonus just, again, looking back, I saw the bonus flash in his eyes. He's like, hell yeah, I'll schedule it. So he scheduled a PAST for the next week, and I passed it and took the ASVAB and obviously, qualified for every job in the Air Force there. And so then it was just a matter of, waiting for an indoc slot to drop. And so graduated from high school, and I was in DEP, delayed entry, and ended up shipping off in October of 2006. So I was at home working at Steak and Shake and hanging out with my parents and my brother, who was living with us at the time. And they kind of told me midway through summer that a slot was dropping in October. So I hit boot camp, Air Force basic military training, and off to the races.
We interrupt this episode to talk about Synthesis Tutor, the world's first superhuman math tutor. It is warm, patient, and understanding, and adapts to your child so you never have to worry about them falling behind when it comes to math. In episode 84, we spoke to Chrisman Frank, the CEO of Synthesis, and immediately afterwards, I purchased Synthesis Tutor for my daughter, and it has been an absolute game changer for us. Math used to be a very painful experience. It was frustrating, and there was lots of tears for my daughter when it came to learning math. It's something she's not naturally good at, and we struggled a lot. Now she happily uses Synthesis Tutor every single week, and there's no more frustrating nights. The way it works is that it leverages AI to adapt the experience to your child to not simply master memorization of math facts, but it actually teaches the principles and concepts so that your child can independently solve problems without needing tons of outside help. Because it tailors the experience to your child, it is always adapting and learning where the child is in terms of their development, and it keeps them in the proximal zone of learning so that your child is being challenged but not getting frustrated or defeated by the experience. I am very pleased with our experience on Synthesis Tutor. My daughter's grades have improved in math. It's something that I can now outsource. I don't have to take the time myself to sit there and try and memorize facts with her. She gets excited to do it, and it's fun and engaging for her to learn instead of this frustrating experience, and it doesn't feel like a chore any longer. So we at the Present Fathers Podcast highly endorse Synthesis Tutor. There is also a Teams function for those with multiple kids or maybe multiple families want to pool their children together. You can check that out on the website. You can get 10% off with your purchase by going to synthesis.com/PFP. That's synthesis.com/PFP. Go there, check it out, and start supercharging your child's learning experience with the power of AI. Back to the episode.
That's awesome. So quick question for you then. I had a similar experience to George, to you. You guys ended up going military. I never did. I never considered it even a possibility of a direction I could go. I said, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go be a doctor, a lawyer, or something. That's just, tunnel vision. That's the direction I go. Military recruitment is at the lowest level that it's ever been in history, right? It's a disaster. We're having a very hard time getting young boys and men to have any interest in being a part of the United States military. How do you change that culture? How do you make being in the military cool again? I mean, the advertisements are not working. Be all you can be is just not resonating, right now. Have you thought about that as to why young boys don't want to be in the military and how that can change?
I've thought a lot about it. I have many thoughts about it. I don't know if any of them are right. But I actually think kind of back to the thirds though, like the 2/3 that are the most important of the three, right? Financial and benefits as an umbrella, right, is 1/3, and then patriotism and adventure are the other 2/3. We focus way too much, in my opinion, on, I'm just going to blanket say in my opinion here, so I don't have to like interject with my opinion and I think the whole time, just so the audience is clear. I'm not making proclamations and declarations as a legislator. But I think that the adventure third and the patriotism third just do not get enough attention. I think we spend way too much attention on the benefits. Not that we shouldn't get benefits, not that we didn't benefit from the post 9/11 GI Bill. I benefited directly from the GI Bill expanding, and the PACT Act. We all benefit from the PACT Act, and there are some of those things that I do think are important, but it shouldn't necessarily be the focus. The focus should be go have an adventure and find purpose. and go serve your country. Go serve, a country that is imperfect, but also worth fighting for, and worth fighting with your other citizens that you may not have otherwise been exposed to, if you just stayed in your hometown and went to the college that everybody else went to, and kind of went down that track. Again, those things are important too. Like, we wouldn't have a country if everybody chose to join the military. But that's the long answer. The short answer is, I think we need to focus way more attention on adventure and purpose and difficulty, right? That's why, like, the Marines, right? They love having the worst gear and the shittiest conditions, and operating in the most austere environments, and telling the rest of us to go kick rocks. And I love them for it, even though I would never do what they did, right? But like, that kind of thing is something that I want to be able to aspire to, that kind of mentality and that kind of mindset, that kind of approach. And I want our kids, whether it's my kids specifically who would make that decision, or just the next generation, to have that desire to go do difficult things, to go serve a purpose, and to go, serve a great country that has many flaws, but we're really only going to figure out how to fix those together. In the military, I think, is a huge piece of that.
I love that. And don't forget that the Marines do get the tastiest crayons. So they do have something that gets they do, the most delicious.
They do indeed.
I have even seen a crayon flavored beer now. I'm not even kidding. I think actually a mutual friend of ours, Nick Freitas, posted about it. Said, "Be careful, Marines. Don't go too crazy this weekend." It's a real thing now. Yeah. I'm gonna withhold my thoughts on why to Dustin's questions. Otherwise, we're gonna be here all night. So. Carey, let's move forward a little bit too, because so obviously you wanted to go do the hardest thing, prove yourself. Was any element of that like you were looking for kind of proving yourself as a man, or was it purely like, hey, I just want to really challenge myself? Like, you know what I mean? Like, for me, that was a big motivation that I didn't really admit. Was I felt like this insecure little kid, and I wanted to prove how tough and hard I was, right? So I wanted to join the Army and do all these things, and I had still the patriotism and all that kind of stuff too. That was the big idealistic stuff. But kind of what was that thought process for you? And then walk us through kind of like how it actually started going for you.
That's actually an interesting question. That kind of like loaded term these days, but that kind of like gender identity question, right? Like, I don't actually know if I felt that way, that I felt like I needed to go kind of prove myself on that front. To me, I think it felt more in the second portion of your question, which was like, just go do hard things, and just kind of try to prove myself in general. I mean, my dad was an elite athlete. He played football, but he ran track. He ran track at Ohio State, and he ran track at UCLA, where he was training for the Olympics. And then my brother was not an elite athlete, but he was an elite competitor, super small dude playing D3 football. And so, I had, two very strong men that I looked up to, and I was around quite a bit. Well, my older brother, I looked down because I'm taller than him, but I looked up to them, and definitely felt very secure in my masculinity, and very secure in kind of who I was as a boy turning into a man. And I think that was just probably a subconscious thing of like, oh yeah, there is a threshold crossing here, right? Like, there is boot camp, basic military training does kind of have that that call to adventure, that answering that call, and that threshold, and that transition, I guess, that you make kind of from boy to man. So I didn't really think about it, just because I kind of had that security around me, and it wasn't like, I didn't think that I wasn't trying to be better than anybody else. I was trying to be just kind of a better version of myself. I wouldn't have said it that way at the time, but kind of looking back, that's what it was. So yeah, I just went in to go do something and prove myself in general.
So you talked about transition from boy to man. I'd like to talk a little bit, since we're talking about military stuff, about what was like one of the biggest things that you learned in the military, and what was one of the biggest things you learned when you transitioned as a civilian?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The biggest thing that I learned transitioning into the military was that details matter, and like the whole person, like the way that idea of, I don't now necessarily agree with this aphorism, but the idea of like how you do everything, or how you do one thing is kind of how you do everything. I was very much, happy as a young boy to be athletic and to be successful in sports, to be all district honorable mention and read a bunch of novels but get bad grades. Like I was very cool with just being a little bit all over the place, and where I felt I was successful and where I was successful I was comfortable with, and where I wasn't successful I was like, yeah, whatever, who cares, like that stuff doesn't matter. And transitioning into the military, I very much learned that your whole person matters. Like who you are as a person informs everything that you do. And all of these details matter. And obviously, especially, getting right into I'll tell you a funny story and I'll answer, Brandon, I'm not going to deliberately not answer the second part of your question. I'll wait till we get to my transition out of the military. But once we get there, I'll answer that portion of the question. But so funny story about details in basic military training. I got recycled 1 week in basic military training for this very thing. In the Air Force, you get your uniform issue 1 is like your fatigues, right? Your camis, your at the time for me it was BDUs, right? Your BDUs and all of the field gear and your day-to-day gear, and then your uniform issue 2 is your dress blues. So uniform issue 1, like no problem, whatever it was. Uniform issue 2, I went, and as you go through the line, you tell people what your sizes are. They do some measurements here and there, but you tell people what your sizes are, and you kind of get everything. And so I grabbed my trousers, right? You learn to call things blouses and trousers, things like that in the military, which I'd, kind of always thought were just terms for girl clothes, like blouses. But here you are in the military, wearing a blouse. And so, I kind of get all that stuff, take it back, and you have to try it all on, like whatever. And I realized that my pants size, they gave me the wrong pant size, and it was like just one size too small. It was like I'm a 34-32, they gave me a 32-30. So I told my drill instructor, and he said, march back by yourself, blah blah blah. They made an appointment. I marched back, and I'm talking to the civilian, the woman who's working there, and I said, ma'am, trainee Kite reports as ordered. I need a different size. I got the wrong size. And she goes, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, just step over there and, take your PT shorts off and we'll get you sized up. And I said, no, ma'am, I can't do that. And she said, why not? I said, well, I'm actually not wearing any underwear underneath my PT shorts. And she goes, you will be turning around and going back to your flight, and you will be telling your drill instructor what just happened here. And I was like, oh shit. Uh-oh. So I marched all the way back, and I had to tell him, right? It's the middle, like you just can't, there's no way around it. Like we got to the spot where I'd have to wear these dress blues, and I had 32-30s and I need 34-32s. So I had to tell them what happened, and they recycled me a week. They sent me back to another flight. And it felt like at the time I was obviously embarrassed. I was angry. I was like kind of all these things, but I realized that it was one really, really small detail, and I was living my life, my outside of the military life inside the military, not wearing underwear under PT shorts on a Saturday, which is a very reasonable thing that I now do in my life as a 36-year-old veteran. As I don't have to think about it. But back then, like these details matter. Everything you do matters, right? Like you will have things expected of you that you're not expecting, right? And so it was really harsh. Cool thing is I got to my next flight and I earned an element leader spot, and I was able to kind of, help lead my flight through graduation. And we had a really successful flight, and I was able to, right that ship, so to speak. But, it was something I used to be very embarrassed about. And now I'm able to tell the story the way I just did and understand that all these things, fit in a way that's shows the development that you go through from civilian to functioning service member.
You really freeballed that story. Nice job.
Yeah. Really hanging loose on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, exactly.
Loose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dustin, well done on the well-timed dad joke there. Okay, so Carey, let's get to the meat and potatoes of what you did in the Air Force. Talk us through what you did. You obviously set out wanting to do special operations. What did you actually end up doing? And then we'll get to kind of leaving the Air Force, because I know you've got a really inspiring story there about kind of forging your own path after service.
Yeah, so I went through graduated basic military training. I got to pararescue indoctrination. Now it's totally different in the Air Force. They have ANS and all that stuff, but at the time it was indoc. And so I got there a week late. Everybody asked why I got there a week late. I told the story I just told. Everybody laughed, and I got smoked a lot. It was super fun. I went through indoc. I did pretty well. There, I got recycled once for pull-ups, but then I just was weak on pull-ups, and so I kind of went through with the recyclees. So I went through Hell Night twice, which was kind of fun, and made it all the way to the end of the course. Kind of made it through to graduation, but not through graduation. I failed the final run by 6 seconds. I did everything else. Top marks, the 4,000 meter swim, the 95 push-ups and the 85 sit-ups, and I crushed pull-ups, right? I had like a bit of a pulled groin at the time, and I just couldn't get through that 7.5 mile run or whatever it was. And then a week later I got in a car accident and messed up my knee pretty bad. And so the commandant was like, listen, I was like, we can't afford to keep you in the pipeline and just pay for you to be rehabbing here. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to, go to the conventional Air Force. You'll fill out another form, and the big Air Force will put you where they need you. And then you'll come back if you want, right? And like a couple of my element leaders in Indoc, actually one guy, I don't know if y'all are familiar with One's Ready, the podcast, the Aspect War podcast, but Aaron Love, he had gone through Indoc a few times, and obviously now he's a highly decorated PJ. Excellent man, excellent dude, great operator. He was kind of just, he was great. And so he was somebody I leaned on as I kind of went through that process and watched him graduate and go through the pipeline. And so in my head, I was like, I know I only want to do 4 years, but I kind of got a taste of this thing and I really like it. And so maybe I'll want to come back one day. And so it was tough. I filled out another form and got some letters of recommendation to try to get a good job. And ultimately Big Air Force put me in armament, which is, Marine Corps and Navy would call it an ordnanceman. Air Force is called armament. And we were just responsible for loading all of the munitions onto and into, fighters and bombers and helicopters. And so I got assigned to F-15s, E-models, and went to tech school in Shepherd Air Force Base, just north of Lackland, where I was in Texas, right on the Oklahoma border, and spent some time there. And, that was another transition moment that was really, really difficult for me to make it through. Like, I really got that taste of special operations. I really got that taste of that kind of athletic life, that operator life, that thing. I mean, obviously, like, the instructors are, legendary, like, Medal of Honor winners. And I was like interfacing with people that were just like very, very elite people in the military. And I got that taste, and it was really difficult. And I was very arrogant, and I had this, not even a chip on my shoulder, because that would make it sound good. Like I had something about me that was just unhappy with where I was, unhappy with being in the conventional Air Force. And it was really, really, really difficult for me to leave that community and go to Big Air Force. So
you felt like you deserved better, right?
Man, that sounds more positive than it actually was. Like
really, okay.
It wasn't even about like what I thought I deserved. It was more about like what I thought, that I kind of should be doing, right? Like this, like these other jobs, like we're
right.
kind of
like I don't belong here. This is beneath me, type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Which is obviously, that's terrible on two fronts, right? Like that's putting the special operations community up on a pedestal that they're never going to be able to live up to, and that's putting the rest of the support personnel down in a way that, like, no, like we literally need, a full force across our sister services to fight this war, right? And that all sounded very cliche, and it sounded very trite, and it sounded like just awful to me. And I hated it. I hated myself. I hated the Air Force. I was very unhappy. And my dad was instrumental. he and I talked every day anyway, but I would find myself complaining, for lack of a better word. And then he was the one who walked me through, that, listen, those ideas sound cliche and sound trite for a reason. It's because there's some very, very deep truths behind them, which is that every job matters, and whatever your job is, you are called to do it as well as you possibly can. And you were in the arena and you failed, for lack of, for not failed in the sense of like failure as a human and failure as a son and failure as a man, but just like you didn't meet the standard. You failed your run, and then you got in a car accident, and this is where you are. You're not able to be there. This is where you are. This is where you have to be. This is where you have to be the best version of yourself. And this is where the Air Force needs you to be. This is where the country needs to be, all that good stuff. And so, he and I would just talk every day. And I worked, man. I worked my ass off, not physically and even academically, kind of going through tech school and tech training, but more just emotionally, to work myself into a spot where I could learn to enjoy doing difficult work, learn to enjoy doing something I didn't sign up for, and learning to serve with a purpose, and really using service and purpose as the North Star rather than the physical or professional activity as the vessel for that purpose and service, but really understanding, purpose and service in and of themselves are what I'm pursuing, and the physical and professional tasks are the vessel for it, if that makes sense. And so, I ended up winning the Weapons Warrior Award in that class, which is the troop that the instructor would most want to have on their team, on their crew, in the operational Air Force. What's cool about it is the weapons career field in the Air Force is still a small unit. I was talking about this on the podcast I recorded today with a tier 1 PJ. It's like, I didn't see that the environment that I was going into was actually very, very similar to the things that I loved about football and basketball and track and all of that. And what I loved about INDOC and the special operations community. I was going to a small unit where I was going to be a 3-man on a crew of 3. And we had to stay qualled every month. So I wasn't kicking doors and shooting bad guys and jumping out of planes, but I was still staying qualled. I had to be physically fit. I had to be mentally fit. I had to get a TS. I had to do all these things. And so once I kind of shifted my mindset and I was able to see, there is a way that I can still scratch some of these adventure itches and these purpose itches through this new community. I went and got stationed at Lakenheath in the UK and spent 3 years in England and deployed twice to Bagram from there, and then got chosen to do a lot of NATO TDYs where I was working with allied air forces and working with some militaries that were trying to get into the EU. And so I ended up doing some really, really high level, not high speed, but high level stuff, and working with lots of people across lots of different disciplines in ways that were, I look back and I'm like, man, I couldn't have written that script. I'm really, really glad that it all happened the way that it did.
Yeah. So first thing, screw the Air Force, because you guys get to go to really nice places. Secondly, no, man, I had a very similar experience too, right? I wanted to be infantry. I wanted to be all these hard things and, do all the elite things. Fell short, right? Fell short of the mark. Got tumbled down to artillery, not by choice, and I was like, I thought my life was over. Oh, this is terrible. I'm better than this. That same mentality, man, it was probably the best thing for me. I mean, I had incredible experiences, met incredible people, got to do stuff I had no idea I would have been able to do. So it's just such a great lesson, right? Life is going to do things. It's going to kick us. It's going to throw us around. And being able to just reframe, I love the way you put that and the way that your dad played such a huge role in helping you to change your mindset about it, because you ended up having these incredible experiences and stories. Man, I've had that happen numerous times in my life, not just in the military. So what an incredible lesson for every man who listens to this to take that. Yeah. And yeah, it's going to happen again, right? At some point, something's going to change. You're going to have to adapt, and making the most of it is a superpower.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's obviously, and I'm a fan, Ryan Holiday and Stoic philosophy and Stoic history, and I read. I'm actually halfway through Right Thing right now, as we speak. His latest in the Virtue series, and so I'm a big fan of Stoicism. One of the reasons I am is because I grew up in a home where my dad taught that. And he actually ended up teaching it for a living, and kind of not on the philosophy side and not on the author side, but he did leadership and culture development and training. And the kind of core principle that he taught is E plus R equals O, which is event plus response equals outcome, right? Which is the Stoic adage of it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond. The Stoics said how you react, right, is how it was translated. But my dad talked about response as different than reaction, right? Response is intentional, and you're not going to control the outcomes, right? You're not going to get exactly what you want, but in order to get the best outcome that you possibly can, you're not responsible for the events that happen to you. You're only responsible for how you respond. And so that was the talk track, and that was the line of thinking. But more importantly, it was backed up by the way that we lived our lives as a family, the way that we talked, every day, every night at dinner. Like these were the things, and I was able to like really put those into practice. And that was kind of the first time where, because growing up listening to my dad and my brother, they worked together, and so listening to them talk about that, and talk about these organizations that they're working with, sports teams and banks and all these different accounting firms, all these different. And I'm like, man, I don't see how I can apply this, as a student, or maybe as a football player, basketball player, I get that. But even then it's kind of low level stuff. But this experience moving from special operations to the conventional side of the Air Force I ended up looking at it as this really great opportunity to cross that threshold into fully understanding how to respond to events that you don't like, to get outcomes that are better. Not the ones that you want, not the ones that are perfect, but better.
Right. That's an amazing lesson there. And that formula he said, that's so good. It also sounds like we talk about this a lot, the importance of building a strong family culture, having family values. It sounds like that was ingrained in your family for a very long time. And so even as an adult, you already had that within you because he instilled it in you. And that's just so beautiful to hear, because that's how it's supposed to work. And it's so often it isn't working that way. So it just inspires me to hear that he played such a pivotal role for you to kind of have that strength of will and character, and then help you through it too, as it was happening to you. He didn't just like leave you to your own.
Well, it's
Dustin
funny. Like, sorry, go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what an unusual way to grow up. Most men in America are completely emotionally dysregulated. We weren't taught anything about how to handle our emotions. We potentially see rage as a very masculine thing, to get angry and to fly off the handle shows that, I'm passionate and I'm intense, right? Whereas Stoicism says that that's not the best way to handle things. So what will you take from that experience for your own children? Will you teach something almost exactly like what your dad taught you, or is there some nuance to it that you want to do a slightly different system with your kids?
I mean, that's a really good question. So one of the things that my dad taught was what core values actually are, right? And core, the Latin word for heart, it comes from the Latin word for heart, core, right? And so core values are not posters on the wall, right? They're not talk tracks. They're not like things that the CEO says in a keynote once a year. They are the values that you live, that are inscribed on your heart, right? They are the way that you live your life. They are the way that you execute kind of all of these tasks, right? So I remember as I was struggling to figure out what my personal kind of core values are and what they were, my dad said, here's a good idea. Use the Air Force's core values for as long as you can. Just use those. Like, don't worry about trying to think about coming up with your own. Use these ones that work, and use them as long as you can, until you kind of figure out how you want to live your life and how you want to adjust those things. So I'm going to do the same thing here, right? Like the way that he taught me these things, there's no reason for me to deviate from those things quite yet. I'm still just a very young dad. We're very young parents. Our daughter, we only have one kid right now. She's 4.5 years old. And, we learn more every week about ourselves as humans, ourselves as parents, ourselves as partners and teammates, and about our kids, or about our kid, than we can possibly handle. And so I'm at that spot now where I'm like, I don't want to deviate necessarily too much from the system that my dad installed, so to speak, in the home, because I'm not quite ready to like do that yet. But what's cool about that is, and having a great partner and teammate in my wife, is that what I didn't have as a kid is now I have somebody that I can lean on, and I can kick things back and forth with, and we can sharpen each other, where we can say, all right, our parents did this thing this way, and our parents did this thing this way. How do you see that? What do you think? Like, how do we kind of sharpen, how do we use each of those sets of experiences to kind of sharpen our own set of experiences? I'll use an example. My wife took my daughter to, I told you, Andrea played college golf, so she's very good. And so one thing we've tried to do is expose Isla to, as many sports as we can. And we love golf, and we watched a lot, and she sees it a lot. And we've been out to the range quite a bit, and she's come with us. And so Andrea took her to get some golf clubs and take her to the range the other day. And she did okay, but then refused to carry them, and then, refused to treat them with respect, and then kind of threw them on the floor or threw them on the ground and kind of scratched them up. And so I was at home, like they were just doing their own thing. And so they came home, and I was like, how are my golfing girls? And Andrea walked around the corner, and she's like, I was like, oh no, like what happened? So she explains to me kind of everything that happened. She had told our daughter to come down to the basement. And so she and I are having this conversation, and I kind of peeked around the corner, and I was like, I want to make sure she's not listening to kind of what we're saying, not because we were saying anything bad, but I just kind of had one of those things. And she said, no, she should hear us work through this and try to figure out how it is that we want to parent her. Because if she hears us doing that, she knows that we respect each other and that we respect her. And, so this is all part of that process. And so that's what we did. We just kind of went through and she's like, well, my parents kind of talked about, golf and clubs and different things this way. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. And, so I don't know how much of that I want to do. And so we kind of worked through this thing together for something I wasn't even a part of. And we ended up kind of working through this together and kind of came to this resolution together as a family. And it was very much this like, all right, well, how do we take these experiences that we had kind of separately as athletic kids, kids that were involved in this, and then how do we then put those together and do this the way that we want to do it with our kid, knowing that, we're probably going to make some mistakes along the way. But sharpening each other and like really feeling our way through that process. I don't know if that answers your question, Dustin.
It does. Yeah. So what resolution did you come to? What did you end up deciding to do about it?
She ran 6 miles. And then, no, I'm just kidding. So what Andrea ended up having her do was, take all of the golf clubs out of the bag, put them back into the bag and kind of say what each club was. And then because she hadn't carried the clubs before, she did have to walk down the driveway and then back up the driveway to prove that she could hold the clubs. And the reason we had her do that was just because you don't just get stuff, right? Like privilege is a word that gets thrown around quite a bit and has been co-opted. But it's true. Like we have things and we were able to do fun things like go buy golf clubs and then go to the driving range and do fun things. And so with that comes responsibilities, or you're responsible for your stuff. And so it wasn't a punishment. It was just hey, you are responsible for these golf clubs. They are yours. You need to know what they are and what they do. And you are the one that needs to carry them. So if you can prove that you can carry them and that you're not too tired to do it, then we're good. And you've kind of fulfilled the thing that you didn't fulfill before, and now you're able to kind of start over next time.
And you worked with her on it, right? You guys learned together. You didn't fly off the handle and bust her clubs, and traumatize her, that kind of thing. It was an opportunity to learn, so it turned a negative into a positive. That's awesome.
Yeah. No Happy Gilmore here.
No.
All right, let's jump to the end here. You decide to get out of the Air Force, right? What did that process look like? You can answer Brandon's question about what was the thing you learned through that process, and then we'll get to kind of what you did next.
Yeah, no doubt. So
and just real quick question: did you meet your wife while you were in the Air Force or after?
We met in high school. We actually dated. That's a whole nother podcast. And she and I recorded a podcast together. So for those that want to listen, you can find that on my feed.
We'll link it.
But yeah, we met each other in high school and dated towards the end, and then kind of dated off and on throughout her time at Ole Miss and my time in the military, and then we ultimately found our ways back to each other. And we've been married it'll be 7 years in 2 weeks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, she's been along for kind of this entire journey, kind of in and out, and friends most of the time, and so she has an interesting experience and perspective of all this stuff. So yeah, I decided to get out. My recruiter was right. Like 4 years was enough for me. I didn't want to go back. I had enough injuries, and I didn't want to go through some surgeries and rehab and really go try to. I didn't want to be a career military service member at all. So the operator stuff was I still had some latent desires, right? Some like kind of unfulfilled things in the back of my head and in my heart that were a little bit difficult for me to work through. But really, at the end of the day, my recruiter was right. At 4 years, I was ready to go. I had kind of fulfilled all 3 of the thirds, right? I'd served my country. I'd been to Afghanistan twice and done stuff all over Europe with NATO. I had a bunch of awesome, crazy adventures, ups and downs. And I secured, my benefits by serving honorably and getting discharged honorably. So I fulfilled all 3 of those things that I was interested in. And the process was pretty simple. I was like, I'm going to go back home and move in with my brother who's living in Columbus, Ohio. at the time, and I'm going to enroll at Ohio State, go study film and creative writing, which is something that I had always wanted to do. And it had always been a dream. It's something I didn't talk about earlier, but one of the reasons my dad and I had those conversations about him paying for college was because he knew I wanted to go study writing and I wanted to go study art and be creative. And he's like, you don't get good grades. I'm not going to go pay for art school, And so now that I had this kind of interdependent relationship where I was paying for school through the GI Bill and I was working and paying my brother rent and all that stuff, I was able to just come back and do what I wanted to do. So I studied film studies at Ohio State for a year. And it was great to be back in Columbus, to be at Ohio State where so many of my family members went, and, obviously a big fan of the sports teams and all that stuff. But ultimately it wasn't the right academic fit. The film program was more of a kind of film critique and film studies and less of an execution, and more of a theory. And I didn't want that. And so I ultimately ended up kind of Googling like best screenwriting colleges in America. And I found this one that was an accelerated program down in Orlando, Florida, called Full Sail University, which, TLDR there is
my mom worked there. That's so weird.
Really? Oh,
yeah, I
cool.
know Full Sail really well. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. What did she do?
She was financial aid.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's basically like Phoenix or DeVry, but for the arts and entertainment, right? So a lot of recording arts and music. I mean, tons of people win Grammys on like the engineering and mixing side of things. All those grads, they do really well, and the film program is really good. And I enrolled in the screenwriting program there. It's called Creative Writing for Entertainment. So I studied across all different media. So graphic novels and comic books, screenplays, novel writing, short story writing. I got published online with some short stories while I was down there, wrote a couple of screenplays that did well in some online kind of festival type, things, won some small awards, and, showed aptitude and showed potential, past just studying it, but actually being able to execute it. So I went down there. It was a great experience as a military student for me because I was working, I was living with guys and gals that went to UCF, right down the street. I was working at PF Chang's, had a great relationship, great circle of friends, great relationships with people there that were not, from the military, that didn't have military experience. So I wasn't like back and like only around other guys that had served. So it was an awesome experience. Like I love that I went down there and worked and paid rent and, owned a car and, kind of like did all those things. As an older military student, I built a lot of really great relationships with my professors. Being an older student, I was able to do that, which was really cool. And then I left there and I went straight to LA because I really wanted to make it on the indie film side of things. I had this dream of being, an indie filmmaker like Christopher Nolan, right? I would do like, a couple indie films, and then I would work my way up to these big AAA blockbusters, and then do another indie film, and then do another, I just obviously had no idea how the industry worked, right? I just kind of had, big dreams. And so I went to LA and started working on sets. And Brandon, this is what gets the answer to your question. My first job in LA, I was applying for like hundreds and hundreds of unpaid production assistant jobs through, Craigslist and Mandy.com and all these kind of industry websites where you can apply for those kinds of things. And I applied for an unpaid PA position for a web series that had some funding for it. And so it like had some talent attached to it, some actors and actresses that people would recognize. And so I went to go meet with these producers. I was expecting to meet some like grizzled old Hollywood producers. And I ended up meeting a bunch of like three guys my age. And I was like, 25 at the time. And I'm like, man, this is weird. And they're like, hey, like, we saw you went to film school. That's really cool. But we saw you were in the military. That's, thank you for your service. And also like, that's something you don't see a lot like out here. That'd be really interesting. So you're going to be, if you take this gig, you're going to be a production assistant in the assistant director department. And here's a book on what assistant directors do. And they basically just run the set, right? Like they run everything from talent management, making sure everybody gets through hair and gets there on time, gets through hair and makeup and wardrobe and all the things they need to do. And that's the second assistant director. And the first assistant director is the one who works with the camera guy and the director to make sure that they're getting the shots that they want and that everything is running on time. It's very much like, in the Air Force would be like an ops soup, right? And so I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like I can figure this out. And there was going to be two people working above me, the second assistant director and the first assistant director. Long story short, both of those people quit within the first 3 days as we were building the set. And so it got to the day before our first day of shooting, and the producers who were also the writers and the stars of the show, and then their counterpart, who is the kind of production manager, looked at me and they're like, "Do you think you can do this by yourself?" And I was like, "Guys, we don't have a choice. Like, you had to come to me to get to fulfill an unpaid PA position, and now here I am running the entire department, which is just me. So we don't really have a choice. So yeah, like let's go LFG, you know." And they kind of laughed and very nervously, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, exactly. Do it live." I'm like, "I don't know, man." And so the first half of that first day was rough, and then at lunch, I was sitting there. I'm like, man, this is like drinking water from a fire hose. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But as I'm sitting there, I'm sitting with the director and the director of photography, the camera guy. I'm looking around and I see each department is sitting with themselves. So I saw all the hair and makeup people. I saw all the wardrobe people. I saw the grip and electric. I saw the camera team. And then I saw the flight line. So I saw weapons, crew chiefs, avionics, engines, air to ground equipment. And I realized, oh, this is just like the flight line in the Air Force. Like, all I have to do is make sure all of those people have everything that they need. And this bird is going to get up in the air. It's going to have the munitions it needs. It's going to drop those munitions, come back Winchester, and we'll do it again. And that was kind of the first time that I saw, and I didn't think about it this articulately at the time, but that was the first time that I saw that it's not the direct one-to-one skills that we develop in the military. It's not, like whatever you did as an artillery troop. It's not that. It's the way that the system works and how you can work that system, take those systems and apply them and adjust them to whatever environment that you're in.
Yeah, it's those conceptual kind of soft skills that are just so ingrained in the military, Yeah. Like there's many things too I take for granted. Like I know these things about like leadership or, how to motivate people and discipline. Like most people have no clue because they have zero experience with it, and I have to like remind myself that like, oh yeah, I don't think about things the way most people do simply due to the fact that I was exposed to this for so long. So that's that man, that gets you so fired up to see you kind of have that moment of like seeing it all play out and be like, oh, I know this.
And you didn't fall for that classic trap that so many young men do, which is that's not my job, right? 9 out of 10 men would have looked at that and said, this isn't what I signed up for. This is crazy. I'm out, right? And you said, I sense opportunity here. I can do something I haven't done before, LFG. And that's how you got that opportunity. So I encourage every young man listening to this story, that's where your opportunity comes from. It's always when it's a little bit more than you expect. It's something maybe you're not supposed to be doing. It's not your job, quote unquote. That's how you get ahead in life, is you do something that's not your job and you feel like a little bit of an imposter. You do it anyways, you kick butt and you get there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what I saw as an opportunity, I saw it twofold, right? It was an opportunity for me to succeed, and it was also an opportunity for the mission to succeed, right? And like, it's not like as you were talking, Dustin, I'm listening. It's like, it's not like Machiavellian in the sense of like, ooh, I see an opportunity and I'm going to get in there and prove myself. It's like, no, I actually see an opportunity to integrate myself into a system that's not functioning as well as it could. So I'm going to get better. The system is going to get better and the mission is going to be accomplished and everybody wins.
That's leadership, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And that's where I say a lot of time too is, as men, you can apply leadership skills and value without having the title, right? You can identify a problem, know that you have the capability and the ideas to change it and make a positive outcome, and apply it, right? So leap when the opportunity is there. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Great lessons there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good.
Let's transition now to you started your production company,
Yep.
right? You've been doing that for a long time now.
Yep.
You've been pretty successful. You are an entrepreneur. You run your podcast. Give us a high level of that, and then I'd love to kind of get into Carey the family man, and then also the role that your father has played in your life.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, so I spent a couple years out in Hollywood doing very similar things with web series and some feature films and some short films and some different things here and there. I worked with a lot of really cool people. I was able to be around. One of the coolest things about being out there is I was able to be around some A-list stars, like people that you would know, and actually see them working in a very independent film, indie, scrappy kind of way where they were helping each other. They were helping their friends, donating their time and their effort and their energy to these passion projects because they came up with these people and they're the ones who happen to make it, right? and their friends came up with them and then just didn't for some reason. And so what they're doing is they're kind of donating their time and their energy and their effort down here to help their friends. And that was a really cool thing to be a part of, to see, a side of the Hollywood machine that a lot of people don't get to see. And it taught me a lot about how to treat people as you scale within, any industry. In particular, this was the one that I wanted to scale within. And obviously, if you do it successfully, you do it well, you get to be around a lot of really cool people doing really cool things. And it's always really important, not from a charity standpoint to like give back, but more to just to help and work with people. And so it was really cool. So I did that for a couple years. And then I took one, my wife and I got reconnected, girlfriend or, friend at the time. We got reconnected and started dating long distance. She was in New York and I was in Los Angeles. She had a friend in New York who was working in advertising production, and he needed something out in LA. So she connected me to him, and I, did a job for him, and we were having beers after that job. And he was like, you should really consider doing advertising like as your day job. So you're not like waiting tables and tending bar and trying to make it in the industry, work day to day in the industry, really learning the fundamentals and learning how production works, how to tell a brand story, how to tell a product story, like how to work with people that do this for a living. And then you get to make your short films and do your fun content on the side with people that are getting paid well during the week. So they'll do it for pizza and beer on the weekends. And you're not, trying to scrounge together credit cards to enlist other, poor starving artists to try to make short films, which is what I was doing in LA. So moved to New York, started working in advertising. And that was another kind of threshold crossing for me, where I saw, where I saw the flight line on set. Now, as I started working in advertising, I saw the flight line within marketing departments and advertising agencies. So, I saw that there was the marketer who was the client, right? Then I saw strategy and creative and client services and production, which was my discipline. And I realized pretty quickly working in advertising that the production discipline is the one that actually brings every other discipline along with them to ensure that the deliverables get produced, right? Like that's what you're doing at the end of the day. You're producing deliverables, and everybody has a say and everybody has some overlap in that process, right? Like a salesperson, client services sells through the concept and the opportunity, and then strategy kind of tells everybody like how we're going to do it. Creative gets into the tactics that are downstream of that strategy, and then production is, the kind of like logistician that pulls everybody together from all the more creative production disciplines to like bring that set of deliverables all the way through. So I had another one of those kind of like epiphany moments where I saw that, and I was able to see some success working at some of these smaller advertising agencies, because I was working with clients that were working with an adult who had life experience and had deployed and traveled and kind of been around and saw everything that I had just said. And so I was able to be fairly successful working at some small advertising agencies. And it was really, really fun. And then right before COVID, my wife was pregnant with our daughter, and I was working at an advertising agency where the executive producer, which is the role that I wanted to have, which is kind of part creative, part sales, part production logistics. He was mentoring me, still a mentor, still a very good friend of mine. And so I was working with him, and the guys who owned the advertising agency that we were working for, being the cocky guy that I am, I was like, oh, like, let me go talk to the 4-star. I'm working with the 1-star. Like, let me go talk to the 4-star and see what he has to say, right? And so I took the owner out to happy hour and bought him a couple beers and some appetizers. And I was like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to draw a straight line from where I am to where this other guy is, and here's how I'm trying to do it. Like, what do you think about that? And he was very blunt, very honest. And he was like, I don't think you can do it. He's like, I don't think that you should. He's like, he's like, you come from the military, so you understand time and service. Like you haven't been doing this long enough. Like you're not ready yet. And I don't think that it's going to take a long time. You have to stay at your level, stay at your level as long as you can, and then kind of work your way up. And that was my first real inkling that advertising has a very, very, very weird hierarchy that the military prepared me for, which was awesome. But it was obviously devastating to hear at the time. And so I ended up leaving that advertising agency. Let's say it's mutual, like boyfriends and girlfriends say in high school, right? It's mutual. I got non-renewed. My contract got non-renewed, but I was pretty happy about it. So I did some freelance gigs. My daughter was born. I got a job at this another advertising agency, which was slightly bigger than that one at the very beginning of COVID. We launched a brand for Gillette that was an at-home beard care brand, which was the perfect thing to launch at the beginning of a pandemic. And so the client kept requesting more and more and more and more. And I was approached by the owners of that agency with the exact opposite thing that this other guy had said. They said, hey, we love the military frameworks that you bring, but you're not militaristic. Clients enjoy working with you. Creatives enjoy working with you. Would you like to take over the production department and help us scale it to where the type of revenue that we want to generate as an agency? And I was like, listen, I'm wholly unqualified to do that. I've never done that before, but hell yes, I would absolutely love to figure out how to do that with you. And I had told them the story that I just told you. So we all kind of had this energy together behind us. And so, yeah, from 2020 to 2023, end of 2023, I helped them, build the agency, and we scaled it to some pretty legit revenue, and launched a bunch of brands for Procter and Gamble across like Gillette and Crest and Oral-B, bunch of other clients, bunch of tech clients, bunch of PE owned clients. So got a PhD in advertising and production, brand storytelling, product storytelling, kind of like everything that I had gone to school for that I wanted to do had kind of culminated here, and I'm getting all this experience. So while I'm doing that, I'm like, how do I give back to the military community? Because there's people like me that are out there that are loading bombs, or that are kicking down doors, or that are serving chow, or that are in medic and all that stuff. Like, I somehow figured out how I could do what I set out to do, which was produce creative video for a living. I have no idea how I did that. So how do I do that? And so I had a couple of ideas that I kicked around, but I ultimately landed on, because it was COVID, let me start a podcast where you can hop on Zoom and I can just talk to other people. So the best way for me to figure out how I did it was to talk to other people that had done it. So pull the focus away from me and put the focus back on the veteran community and like high achievers there. My dad had a SEAL working for him at the time, he was his director of training. And so I was like, hey man, you're used to being the canary in the coal mine. You want to come on my podcast and be the first one and talk about stuff that, that I'm comfortable talking about, because it's dad's, work and curriculum, so to speak. And so he did that. And then I built the podcast from there and just, chunked it out like one guest, one person at a time. Got rid of my personal Instagram and built started with the Veteran Made Instagram. Just built the community kind of brick by brick. And I was able to find, really cool people through the Dead Reckoning Collective community. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with them, but they publish poetry and memoir and fiction writing from military service members and veterans as a way to bridge the military civilian divide in this country through literature. And so I met a bunch of really awesome artistic, like very much like myself, right? I've kind of found my tribe within the veteran community through these artsy fartsy types. And that's kind of how I really started building and interviewing these authors and poets and cool people doing cool work. And then obviously through my experience with advertising, I found these veterans that are building CPG brands, Bravo Actual, who's building all these supplements, and Epic Dad Company. And, I got in touch with Jack Carr and he came on. He's come on a couple times. He's coming on again this fall to talk about his nonfiction book. Just really took all of my advertising and creative and marketing and production and logistics skills and just put them to bear into this tiny little laptop screen to be like, how can I figure out what this community can do moving forward to get away from this one-to-one, you must get into security, you must get into logistics, you must get into IT, you must get into contracting, all valid jobs, all valuable jobs, all things that we need. And for those that want to go do that, please and thank you for doing that and keeping the infrastructure going. But for those of us that want to do something different, be entrepreneurs, be creative, like how do we do that? And so Veteran Made is a repository of not just positive content, but practical content that primarily military veterans, but anybody can listen to and say, oh wow, okay, that's what that person did. I can action that stuff right now.
So you talk about helping other veterans come into the civilian life and, come from the brotherhood and the tribalistic things that they experience in the military. And then it's kind of almost isolationism, right? When they come into civilian life. So I have friends that are fathers that have served in the military and they struggle with mental health and all these different things and these issues post tours to Afghanistan and that kind of thing. So what are some ways that fellow dads can pour into these veterans ourselves to help them out?
Yeah, that's a really good question again. I would come back to purpose and adventure, right? That tier, right? Like those are not one thing that I've said a lot is like your life is not over. You're not seeking a second career. The adventure, like the great adventure of your life, hasn't even begun, right? Like if you're a service member who's transitioning out, like you have one of the stronger foundations of any citizen could possibly have. Like use it as an opportunity to go pursue purpose and adventure again in a different arena. And then to directly answer your question, Brandon, about how other dads can help those veterans, like remind these dads, remind these men that purpose and adventure is a core part of who we are and how we operate as men and as people and as high achievers. And there's no substitute for that. And it's really hard as an adult, to make friends. It's really hard, for women have their version of it. Right. And we're talking about men here. So like we have our version of it. It's really hard to make friends later in life. But I think the reason that it's hard is because it's so valuable to do. Right. And there's like lots of ways that we can instill purpose and adventure in our own lives and in each other's lives through, whatever physical activity, golf, or whatever it might be, or just getting together and sharing things with each other, whether those are physical things, physical activities, difficult things that you're doing. Find ways to do difficult things with other people. Share your feelings, be open, be honest, be vulnerable, and recognize that I mean, it just happened the other day. There's somebody in our community who killed themselves. I didn't know this person, but I saw them all over my social media, and I didn't realize how many people that I knew this person, and they were devastated, and just call each other. Like, it's like I've got friends that I know struggle with stuff. So I probably call them a little bit more often than I call the people that it's perceived that they don't struggle. But just because it's perceived that they don't struggle doesn't mean they don't struggle. And so, I'm just constantly pinging and texting and calling and DMing and just trying to fill the cup as much as I can. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. And it's often your friends that you don't know are struggling that are struggling the most. We tend to hide that very well as men. So it's a real struggle. I'm so sorry to hear about your friend or your acquaintance. That's terrible.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, you've mentioned adventure a number of times. You're a girl dad. I have a girl coming in December along with my boy. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I'm so excited. Yeah, it's going to be great. What is a big adventure to you with your daughter? What's the big thing that you want to be able to do with her to make your life together an adventure? What is a future girl dad? What can I learn from you to have a great adventure with my girl? And this can be over an 18-year period, but it doesn't have to be like a week, trip.
For sure. Yeah, no, I try to do little things. So physical activity and physical things, right? Like we hike, we just go out and do stuff. Like we just go walk, we go hike. We just get out and move. We just get out and do stuff. I'm married a tomboy, which is awesome. So like we get out and do things together as a family all the time. So we're constantly playing sports. We're constantly, playing golf, going to the range. We take her out when we play rounds. Like we're patient. It's not like, we play our own rounds of golf together where we can, kind of like have our own fun. But when she's out with us, like we're doing it with her so that she can see us doing it. But we're also like doing it with her. But yeah, I'm constantly, I take her on errands. Like she's my errand buddy. Like we just go, she goes to the grocery store with me. She like, like when I'm doing laundry, she's like, can I help? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. This task is now going to take 75 times longer than it was going to before. But you absolutely can. And she folds these things and she just does it. And
yes.
It's the best. And then, yeah, I mean, as I forecast like what that looks like as she gets older and as she gets more capable of some of these physical things, like, depending on what her aptitude is and what her interests are, I dove a lot with my dad. We did, scuba diving and free diving. We did a lot of skiing and snowboarding and things like that. So depending on her aptitude and interest, like my radar is kind of keyed up for what those things are for her. Like right now she's really into dance. And so she does dance, and then she's shown interest and aptitude in gymnastics. So we're going to get her signed up for that. And those obviously aren't things that we do together. But they're physical things, and she's out like moving and I'm present and we're there together. So yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
That all sounds like a life of incredible adventure, and I know
Yeah.
you two are going to be great friends. I mean, that's all you can hope for. So I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, get out and move, man. It's the best.
So, Carey, unfortunately, your father passed away just a few months before this recording, as of this recording. And, you know, I didn't know him, but just from this conversation, it sounds like he played an incredibly massive role in your life and making you who you are. It sounds like he was an incredible father. You're a relatively young father, right? The juxtaposition of you just lost yours, raising your own as well. Can you walk us through a little bit of kind of, some of the best things that he taught you and your best experiences with him, and kind of the legacy that he's left from your point of view?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just to go off of what we were just talking about. I mean, like I said, like we dove a lot, right? We did physical things together. Like we were out, hiking and skiing and snowboarding and scuba diving and free diving and snorkeling and doing like fun stuff. Like as we spent time reminiscing, and we were very lucky. He went through hospice. He did 4 years he got diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer at the very beginning of COVID, which was brutal because we were in Ohio. We had left New York to come to Ohio, and we were staying with my mother-in-law because our daughter had just been born, and my dad, she was in Dayton and my dad was in Columbus. And nobody knew what COVID was I'm talking a week into COVID. I was like,
yeah,
I mean, he's got weeks to live. Like, oh, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to kind of, restrictions be damned, like go see him? And thankfully he got into the James here at Ohio State, and was able to, not go down a stage, but he was able to kind of hold steady at the beginning of stage 4, and they gave him 3 to 5 years, and he ended up getting hit, dying right just after 4. So he was kind of right at the tail end of that. He fought it really hard. So we're very lucky. We were able to be together for 4 years. We saw him through his first round of chemo. We stayed in Ohio for an extra, what amounted to about a year, about 9 months, to see him through chemo and back to physical activity. My daughter and I would walk with him at the local park pretty much every other day as he was going through chemo. So some days were better than others, but we were always out together. And she was obviously very young, so we were just pushing her in the stroller. But he and I were just out moving together, and just being together and being with her. And so that was a real blessing that we were able to have that. And then he fought the disease really, really hard. And so there were times where, you'd look at him and you'd be like, okay, that guy's, I knew him. So I kind of, knew he was sick. But we kind of forgot that he had cancer for a few years, right? Because he was just crushing the treatment. And, his mindset was incredible. And, he worked out right up until the end to try to stay as physically fit as possible. So we were very lucky, and we got to go through hospice with him for about six weeks. And so as we were all reminiscing about these things, like we just, all of our, and again, back to being, blessed and privileged to have all these opportunities to go on these vacations that were full of adventure and doing fun things. I mean, that was the vast majority of what we remembered. And, my brother is 6 years older than me. And the through line of our conversations over the course of the last 4 or 5 years has just been our gratitude for what Dad provided for us in terms of not just the kind of mental, skills and toolkit and the mindset of E+R=O and that kind of Stoic philosophy, but also just like how much fun we had. He coached our football teams and our youth football teams, and and then we went out and did all these like physical things together. So there was so much adventure there that looking back, I'm like, man, what a super strong foundation for me, and I'm sure that's where I get most of my mindset on that front. But yeah, I mean, outside of E+R=O, I mean, I think one of the biggest lessons that my dad taught me was that you cannot equate the delay of consequences you cannot equate the absence of consequences with the delay of consequences. And that is something that I took to heart really, really early. And it's something that I think about a lot, and it's definitely something that I'm going to, that I do use to parent, my half of parenting with our daughter. And it's the idea that like, just because you're not experiencing consequences right now for your own actions, does not mean that you're not going to experience those consequences. So you are responsible for who you are in this world and how you operate, how you treat people, how you treat yourself, how you treat the people you love, how you treat the people you don't agree with, how you treat the people you don't like. I observed him make mistakes across that spectrum. But more than anything, he was honest and open and authentic about how he felt about those things and where he fell short. And we were very, very close. We spoke every day. And even right now, I'm like, it happened this morning. It happened yesterday. I'm sure it'll happen tomorrow. Where I'm like, I want to call Dad. I would tell him that, and we would go talk about something. So honesty and authenticity across the board was something that I just treasure, because a lot of people don't get that. My dad was I mean, we talked about everything. He was a pastor and a theologian and an entrepreneur, and a history major and a history buff. I mean, we talked about literally everything, and he was honest and open about what his beliefs were, and we were able to challenge those beliefs if we saw fit, right? And my stepmom, didn't always love that, right? She didn't always love that we got to kind of speak to our dad that way, but. And not that we were disrespectful, but he would invite the challenge, right? He had a very strong frame, and he would speak very confidently, and because we're just blood and genetics, we have that same kind of frame, but also we were cultured to do that. He was very encouraging to think for ourselves, a lot of times, so that he could challenge and so that he could, and it ended up kind of being this sparring match often. But I look back and I'm like, man, I'm so grateful for that. And there's elements of that I do want to emulate with my daughter and hopefully other children if I have them. And then there's some things I'll do a little bit differently. But the foundation of that example, is one that I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, man. It sounds like he really prepared you very well for life and raised you to not just physically become a man, but to actually prepare yourself, for what life will require of you as a husband and as a father one day. And just follow-up question to this, right? Obviously, you knew it was coming at some point, so it's not necessarily like it was a sudden thing, but doesn't make it any less painful. Through the grieving process, I think this is something men really dance around a lot, and we try to stuff things down and pretend that we're all fine. Can you just be a little bit honest about how that's gone for you? Have there been, like you said, your brother, you guys probably talk a lot. How have you processed through this obviously painful loss with the guys that you can rely upon? Because I think we need to normalize that, right? This whole attitude of I'm tough, I can take it, and all that kind of stuff it's not getting us anywhere good. And I can just tell by your demeanor, even today, that clearly you have a great support system around you, and you're not just trying to handle it by yourself. So what's that been looking like for you?
Well, my wife and I started that process very early, about a year ago, as we kind of saw the trajectory of the disease, and we knew what his prognosis was. As about a year ago, we started to have some conversations about what we knew was going to happen and what was going to be required of us. And so we started talking about what that looked like. So it started with her. My brother and I have been having these conversations, for years, and that's there. But it really started with her. And so when the time came that he was looking like he was going to go into hospice, he had stopped treatment and called me, and he and my stepmom called me and told me what happened, that he had stopped treatment and that they were going to start talking to people about hospice. My wife, it was her day to drop our daughter off at school, so I hung up the phone and I bawled my eyes out. And I had cried multiple times throughout this entire process. I'm a preparer. I'm a daydreamer. I'm somebody who tries to forecast and think ahead. And I'm very emotional, and I'm very open about being emotional. And so it's not the first time that I cried. It was very hard because it felt like the first time where it felt like really, really real, like it was happening, not that it was going to happen. And so I had a really, really good cry. And then I called my wife and I said, hey, this just happened. I think I need to go down there. And she said, we've already talked about it. Go buy the ticket, get down. And so I did. It was actually my birthday weekend. I was turning 36 on that Sunday. So on that Friday, I flew down, and I got down there, and literally 2 hours in, to me being there, that we were enrolling in hospice. And they didn't realize that. They thought they were talking about hospice. But as I was watching my parents and I was talking to the nurses, I realized that they didn't realize that he was going into hospice. This wasn't like hey, this is going to happen in a few weeks or a month. This is happening right now. So I said, hey, can you just explain that to us? And so they said, yeah, you're in hospice at the end of this conversation. And so I was pretty much there for the next like 6 weeks. And I had left for one work trip. I'd left for a week to give them some space with some really close friends that came into town. And then my stepmom called my brother and I and we went back down and we spent the last 10 days of his life together. And the only reason I give you all those details is it answers your question, because it starts like, openness and honesty, and being emotional starts in the family. Yeah, it's an example that men need to set for each other, but it also starts like with the family. And so my brother and I are very close. My stepmom and I are very close. All three of us are very close. All four of us were very close. We had some very difficult conversations as a family during that time. But because he set the foundation of telling the truth and having difficult conversations, it's what we do in our family. While it was difficult and while it was emotional, it kind of kickstarted that processing process. And so, we were as prepared as we could be, and we were open and honest about how we felt along the way. And, after he died, my brother went home and I came home here and started preparing for the celebration of life. And we did that here in Columbus, where my wife and daughter and I live. And so we were able to kind of host everything and everybody here, which was amazing. And really, back to having purpose, right? It wasn't just like attending. We as a team, my wife did a ton, and my brother did a ton, and my stepmom did a ton, I'm rambling now, but to directly answer your question, I've been processing it by being open and honest about the feelings that I have when I have them, and encouraging that of the others around me. So if we are feeling something, we just name it. And, my daughter and I, we talk openly about it. We talk openly about the fact that he's dead, and she knew where I was going and why I was going there when I left early, instead of celebrating my birthday that weekend. And we're just honest and open.
Yeah, man, we've had a lot of people, share some very hard stories on this show, and that's been a unanimous thing that every single one of them has said is, we don't, of course, we have the conversations with the children at an age appropriate level, a maturity level that's appropriate, but we don't hide anything. We're very truthful about it. We're truthful with each other about how we're feeling through difficult times. So it's just good to hear you doing that, because it seems like that is the formula for actual success through such difficult things.
Yeah, we don't lie in our family. Yeah, that's a core value that my wife and I have in our house. We don't lie, ever. So if you're going to be uncomfortable because you're going to hear the truth or tell the truth, that might happen, but you're not going to be uncomfortable because you withheld something or lied. We don't lie.
I love that, man. Well, thank you very much for being courageously transparent with us here. And I think Brandon has a quick question for you.
Yeah, one last question. So with new life or with death, obviously a lot of perspective is gained through that. Did it shift your priorities in any way when you lost him?
No. We prepared for it. He prepared us for it. My priorities didn't shift. I mean, there's some things that I'm really bummed that if we're blessed enough to have another kid, he's not going to meet that person, right? That person's going to grow up. And thankfully he was a public figure. And so there's lots of things on YouTube, and we have lots of content, and there's lots of things that person will hear and know and all that stuff. And my daughter and I have, two nieces and a nephew. They're not going to get the same experience that my brother and I got, or that, my wife or my sister-in-law got. So I'm bummed about what they're going to miss out on, but my priorities haven't shifted because he prepared me for life, and he prepared me for as best he could. And I got everything. Anything I would have gotten from him after this would have been a bonus. And so, there was no shift in terms of priorities. There's a shift in terms of day-to-day operations, because I can't just pick him up and pick up the phone. My wife had something happen at work. She's like, man, I would have called your dad today. I would have called him and I'd have asked him about this. And so we missed those things, but the priorities haven't changed.
Well, what a beautiful testimony to such a well-run race. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Again, just thank you so much for sharing that. And, it sounds like he was the example of what we try so hard on this show to raise men up to be, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like he was definitely one of the good ones and did it very well. And no one's perfect, right? And we're not
Right.
saying that he was perfect, but, I can just see the marks of what he did in life through you, right? And I never knew him. I don't know him or anything, but the effect that he has clearly had on you and your family, that's real legacy, right? I say that a lot. It's the strength of the relationships you build in your family. That's number one. That's the most important thing. And clearly he did that.
Yeah.
So that's just a beautiful example to see. I'm grateful that you had that and are sharing it so that, we have a example to follow now, all of us collectively as men. So Carey, we're running out of time here. I want to give you a chance to plug your podcast and where to follow you. What's the best place for people to engage with you and check you out?
Yeah, no doubt. VeteranMadeProductions.com is the hub for everything. So our production company is Veteran Made. Somebody stole that. VeteranMade.com exists. I want it. I can't get a hold of that person. So it's VeteranMadeProductions.com. But the podcast is Veteran Made, and so is our production agency. We're on all major platforms, Spotify, Google, Stitch, all that stuff. Just search Veteran Made, Carey Kight, and you'll find the podcast. We're on YouTube as well. If you're a brand or a person listening that needs, creative production services, you'll also find everything you might need on that website to reach out and engage for some work on that front. I'm really excited to see where we're going to take that arm of the business and kind of take all the learnings from all the places that I've worked and move forward as a cohesive business across both podcast and just content production in general. I'm on Instagram at veteranmade.ck. And I'm on LinkedIn, Carey Kight on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and DMs are open, emails open. Anybody has any questions or any thoughts, feel free to reach out. Would love to connect and help primarily help other veterans as they're transitioning into creative and entrepreneurial fields, but obviously I'm open to helping anybody as well.
I love it, man. Thanks again for your time and sharing your stories. Do you have any final thoughts for the audience before we close?
No, we've covered everything. I'd reiterate, get out and move, find purpose and seek adventure and bring your passion along with you. Don't follow your passion, bring it with you as you find purpose and adventure.
I like that a lot. All right, dads, you heard it from Carey. Get moving. Let's get climbing that mountain of fatherhood. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us, and if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.